All right, it is time to talk about the sacred strength individualization. So we're going to talk about how sacred this strength is, and we're going to talk about what happens when this strength goes sinister. So let's jump in. Let's talk about the domain first of all. This is a relationship building strength. And for me, I do have a lot of high relationship building strengths, and this is definitely not one of them. This is actually my number 29th strength. For my wife Kim, on the other hand, it's actually in her top 10, so it's a very sacred strength for her. It happens to be her number 7. So, one of the things I wanted to, before we dive into what this strength is, I talked a little about a bit in some of my other videos about counter strengths. How oftentimes if we have one strength high, there's another strength that might be really low, and vice versa. And again, in strengths, we don't have opposites. I want to make that very clear. It's not an opposite strength, but it's. I always think of it as kind of the other side of the coin. So same coin, but it's showing a different side. and and so individualization is definitely one of these strengths that has a very clear counter strength to it. And that counter strength would be consistency, which ironically happens to be an executing strength. See, counter strengths don't even have to be in the same domain. They can be, but they don't have to be. So if you have not seen the consistency video, I did that one a while back. And consistency is all about making sure people are treated fairly and they all have the same opportunity and nobody gets left out. That's consistency. Individualization is not focused on everybody. It's focused on individuals and what makes every individual unique. So it really focuses on the fact that we are all infinitely unique, and the person with high individualization understands this and recognizes it, that different people have different needs, they have different desires, they have different talents, different strengths, everything. We are all infinitely unique, and they don't lose sight of that, even when working in a group. So that is one of the things that makes this strength so sacred. I love individualization, even though I don't have it high. I respect it, and I love the fact that my wife does have it high because I need that. I need to lean in on that, lean in on her for that particular strength, because I happen to be high consistency. Consistency is actually my number 9 strength, and for Kim, way at the other end, it happens to be her number 32, I believe. So you can see there's a good example of, if you have one of these strengths high, odds are the other one is going to be low. And for Kim, she has individualization high. I have consistency high. I have individualization low. She has consistency low. So we lean on each other in these areas, and they kind of help us balance each other out. So again, it's individualization is all about understanding the individual's needs, their talents, what they kind of bring to the table in and of themselves. And consistency is all about making sure people have a fair shot at something. They're all included. They all have kind of the same opportunities to participate in something. So both of these are very valuable strengths. If you can combine them both and strike a good balance there, you can see how powerful this is in making things happen and in growing relationships. So that's the gist of the sacred side of this. One of my favorite examples of individualization is when our children were young, and if we had to discipline them, we had to do it very differently because both children were very different. Now, for our son Mark, if he was getting a timeout, he was not allowed to go to his room because that's where all his toys were. He would love to just spend the day in his room. He could, oh, hey, you're sending me in my room. perfect. I'll go. And because that's where all his toys were, that's where all his games were, he'd hang out there and spend the day. He did not need our attention necessarily as much, but our daughter Sarah was just the opposite. If we were to give her a timeout, we sent her to her room, and for her that was the most the worst thing you could do to that child was send her to her room because she wanted the attention. She wanted to be out with us and to be out, to do things. So two very different children. So even in discipline, we can, as a parent, we can recognize the importance of individualization. Different people have different needs. And our two children, when they needed discipline, they needed two very different approaches. So that's kind of the sacred side. Now let's talk about how this strength can go sinister. And yeah, it can go sinister. Individualization goes sinister when the if the best way to example I can think of is if you're working in a group of people, you're working on a group project, and the needs of the individuals starts to outweigh that of the group. In other words, you have this group objective. You're trying to accomplish something. Maybe you're launching a new product line or a new marketing campaign or a new operation. Who knows? Whatever it is, a new menu item if you own a restaurant, and you're trying to get everybody on board, but you're so focused on the individuals that you lose sight of the group objective, and you begin to waste time there. There begins to be some hesitations, and that's one of the things you need to watch out for. That's when this starts to go sinister, is that you're losing track of the group objective. Yeah, you want to pay attention to the individuals, and you want to know what each individual brings to the project, but you don't want to lose sight of the project. You don't want to lose the vision of the forest through the individual trees you're dealing with, okay? So that's one of the things you need to be very careful of. Another thing you need to be careful of if you have high individualization is you need to make sure that you're not making too many assumptions about the people you're dealing with. It's very easy for a person with individualization high to kind of categorize people, or see them in certain ways in a very superficial way that may not really represent who they are. So you need to be careful of that as well. But generally speaking, I think, individualization, I always like to think of individualization and the consistency strength kind of together, because with consistency, how that one goes kind of sinister is that it lowers the bar for everyone. You kind of have to, if there's one person that's kind of lagging behind and you don't want anybody left out, you want to make sure everyone has the same opportunity, you're going to lower the bar performance-wise, okay? So that's where individualization is very sacred, is that it helps keep the bar high, because everybody is treated individually, and that way they can have their own individual goals based on their own abilities and their own capacity to reach those goals. But again, you can see how that does affect the sinister side, because if everybody's not finishing together and one person does not hit those goals properly, it can bring the whole group down. So that's why you cannot lose sight of the group objective. Both consistency and individualization can ultimately go very sinister when working with a group and end up with the same result of not reaching the goal you wanted to reach. Simply because that particular strength, whichever strength, happened to end up going sinister on you. So that's something you got to keep in mind. This is, again, what's the best way to avoid this? In my opinion, it's work with someone who has the opposite strength. I said opposite. I shouldn't say that. Work with someone who has the alternate or the counter strength to whichever one you have. If you have one of these high, make sure you're working with someone who has the other one high. And that way you can, and if you can balance that, you're going to create a very stable dynamic in goal reaching. So that's the best way I can tell you to make sure that you don't let your strength go sinister in this particular instance. All right, I think that pretty well covers individualization. I do love this strength, even though I don't have it high. I recognize how valuable it is, and I love the fact that I've got people around me that do have this high, and where I get to kind of lean in on them and get that support from them. I definitely need that. Otherwise, I would be getting kind of bogged down in my consistency and be limiting the potential of our growth. And that's something I definitely do not want to have happen. So thank you to all you individualization people out there that I've had the pleasure to work with. And I look forward to seeing you all again in our next video. Until then, remember, inspiration starts here.